It has been 10 years since The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt released, and at least in my eyes, became one of the greatest games of all time. It's a release that really put CD Projekt Red on the map and got everybody excited for the future of this company. Well, thus all the anticipation surrounding Cyberpunk 2077. But CD Projekt Red in recent weeks did celebrate the 10-year anniversary. There wasn't anything necessarily major, no massive announcements in regards to The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, but they kind of did honor the legacy of The Witcher 3 by talking about its direct sequel, The Witcher 4. As most of you know, there was a tech demo. It wasn't an actual representation of the game. CD Projekt Red has made that clear following the event with Unreal Engine, but they showed off some of the innovative tech. They also showed off some of the assets and some of the things that they're aiming for with this game. We got to see some various NPC interactions, the living open world, which looks innovative, and hopefully that is what this game ends up being. We also got to see Ciri's new horse, Kelpie, along with a Manticore, which was at one point planned for The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, but was canned. We also obviously got to see the massive northern region that we're going to be exploring in The Witcher 4, which is a Kovir, along with some of the cities and towns in the background. So there was a lot there. Ultimately, though, CD Projekt Red understands the pressure. They know they have to deliver on launch day, and especially after what happened with Cyberpunk 2077, and even to a lesser degree with The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, which had many issues. But this is a new era for the company. Unreal Engine, no longer the Red Engine. So there's definitely a lot of questions, and there's still a little bit, definitely some concerns with this company. Cyberpunk 2077 was lacking with a lot of RPG mechanics, and that's the big area that people want to see improvements on. And we've already gotten some encouraging comments coming from CDPR in recent weeks. They said that they're looking at some of the recent RPGs, some of the massive ones like Baldur's Gate 3 and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 with inspiration, which hopefully means that there's going to be a stronger emphasis on RPG mechanics and also choices and consequences, areas in which I think CDPR definitely can improve on. And hopefully we'll see that with The Witcher 4. Now, while everybody's getting excited about and talking about the future of the Witcher franchise, and specifically Witcher 4 starring Ciri, CDPR is still updating and still working on The Witcher 3, which is right now celebrating just massive milestones. It hit 60 million copies sold in 10 years. That is just huge for a single-player experience. And yeah, it's approaching the eternally popular The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim sales figure. That really puts into perspective how massive this game was for this industry and also CDPR. And even to this day right now, this game is still actively being played by many people, even just Steam alone. It has about 25,000 players daily, and this doesn't include all of the other platforms, including GOG. So there's probably well over, maybe even around 100,000 players probably daily on this game. It really just puts into perspective how popular and how massive it was and still is to this day. Now, as I said, CDPR did not give up and move on completely from The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, and in recent years, they've been updating and improving the game. The biggest example of that is in 2022, right towards the end of the year, in which we got the next-gen update. And this included tons of performance and graphical improvements, a 60 FPS mode, which really made the game buttery smooth on console. It was just awesome to see. But there was also some new content that they included within that, including a massive, well, it wasn't massive, but it was a very lengthy quest. And this was our first real new content since the end of Blood and Wine, which, if many of you experienced it, you would know it was more of a goodbye for the franchise until the new Witcher installment, which obviously we're still waiting for. But yeah, there was also some Netflix outfits and some other stuff there, but it was just a really awesome update. And we have seen that in recent years, CDPR is still working on this game. They just actively are continuing to improve on it. And when you still have like well over around 100,000 players probably daily on the game, it makes sense. Last year, we saw that, they added modding support. This is something that was only integrated for Steam at the time, but in recent weeks we found out that there's going to be cross-platform mod support, aka console mods, is going to be happening. And I think it's just really interesting. You're updating a game that came out 10 years ago and actively improving on it, and you may question, like, why are they doing that? And obviously it's not necessarily just to satisfy those 100,000 players, but it might be because they want this game to continue to live on and even grow a little bit. It keeps the franchise going, especially when you don't have a live service or another entry to keep the franchise going. going, this is an example of it. Just keep on adding and keep on improving. And I think this is a new strategy change that we're seeing from CD Projekt Red. I think the original intention with their franchises, and it's not just obviously The Witcher alone. I think with Cyberpunk, they, were planning probably like an online component, like we've seen with many other franchises like Fallout, for example, or the Elder Scrolls. They had like online MMOs. CDPR, though, I think they're taking a different strategy. They're, going away from that, and instead, I think they're trying to update these games and let them continue to live on and still, keep them alive and fresh in people's minds until the new entries come about. We'll talk about Cyberpunk a little bit later, but yeah, in recent weeks, there's many questions about, is there going to be a Switch 2 upgrade? And it seems to be there's some indication from CDPR this is something that might be coming down the road, and it's notable with what we're about to get into. Eurogamer asked CDPR about a potential Switch 2 upgrade for The Witcher 3, and apparently CD Projekt Red is keeping that under wraps for now, as the focus is currently all in on Cyberpunk 2077. And I think that response is very notable about the future of The Witcher 3 and new content. And this brings us to this. The Witcher 3 may be getting one more story DLC. This isn't just a quest. The report is saying that there might be an actual expansion happening. First details are already online. We have CD Projekt Red's comment. So we'll first get to the actual report. The source of the information is the latest episode of the Rock and Boris podcast, hosted by, Polish names, but Remigiusz Maciasek and Boris Niespielek. I butchered that. The gentleman confirmed in several independent sources that the studio founded by the former developers of The Witcher 3, Fool's Theory, is currently working on a story DLC for Wild Hunt. And the specific remark is, now a very important point, we have to separate what we know from what we don't know. We know that this is a DLC for The Witcher 3. I've come across one piece of information, though I can't confirm it any further, that the earliest release would be next year. We also have a rough idea of the release order. First console mods, which was announced, then The Witcher 3 DLC, then The Witcher 4, and then The Witcher 1 remake. And then this website, Game Pressure, points out, rightfully, as for the things that the hosts don't know, the length of the DLC, its price, and the release date. This information was obtained by this podcaster who was quite surprised that no one had talked about it before him. He himself had known about it for quite some time. That's had to be confirmed, and for me, the key moment was when, during the quarter results, CD Projekt Red said that they were working on an unannounced project with Fool's Theory, and I guess this is the indication that this is what they've been working on. And yeah, the following graphic comes from CDPR's most recent investor call just a couple of weeks ago, and this is specifically what this podcaster is referring to. Long-term outlook update. They talked about The Witcher. The Witcher 4 is in full production. They have, I think, 400 or so developers working on that. It is the main concentration of their Polish office. They have Project Sirius, that is in pre-production. Then they have The Witcher remake, which was already announced that Fool's Theory is working on, but it's notable that is only in the concept stage. That is still probably years away, just like Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk 2, which is Project Orion, that is also in the concept stage. It can be assumed that those projects, we're probably not going to see them until around 2030 at the earliest. But down there at the bottom, very notable that it says unannounced projects, including one developed by The Fool's Theory. And what is that mysterious project? And we might finally have indication of what that is, and it's exciting if that is in fact a Witcher 3, a new one, a new expansion coming to the game. Now, I think the first assumption that everybody rightfully has is that this is going to be a bridge DLC. If you finished, obviously, The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine, that was kind of the finale of Geralt's story. But, if you're going to be making a new paid expansion, which is what this sounds like it's going to be, it's probably going to be something that sets up the events of The Witcher 4 and starts to outline some of the things, some of the themes, and some of the storylines that we're going to be experiencing within The Witcher 4. It's also worth mentioning that Ciri ended up getting recasted for The Witcher 4, so I do wonder if they're going to be bringing back the original voice actors or actresses. That's a big question that'll probably be on everybody's minds, but my working theory, again, assuming that this is all in fact real, is that this is still going to be us playing as Geralt, but it's going to have more of a focus on setting up where Ciri's headed and how she ends up to the northern region of Kovir and whatever this next trilogy is going to be centered about. Probably some teases and some hints at that. But still, a paid expansion is much more than just a quest or two, so I mean, who knows how much hours of content that this is going to be and how extensive that they're going to go to setting up whatever's planned for The Witcher 4. This is something that still should be taken with a grain of salt, but I do think people need to understand that there is some authenticity behind this. This isn't just a random podcast show. As some individuals have pointed out, that one of these podcasters is friends with and close to several Polish game development studios. He even made a documentary about the Polish game dev scene in the past. He often shares insider information about CD Projekt Red. It was actually cited early on when he claimed that the main reason for the Cyberpunk 2077 delays were specifically the old generation consoles, which caused numerous issues at the studio, obviously. Now, CD Projekt Red has commented on this by pretty much saying that we do not comment on rumors or speculation, but in all honesty, this makes perfect sense. If you really want to get people, hyped and anticipated, and this launch is still a couple of years away, I think people need to understand The Witcher 4 just entered full production about 6 or so months ago. We're probably not going to be seeing that game until around 2028, but if you actually have like a little paid story expansion, I don't know how much you define little, but maybe a 10-hour paid expansion that comes about maybe towards the end of 2026, that's a great way to get people talking about and also anticipating The Witcher 4, because there is a massive gap. I think people need to understand, even though The Witcher 3 still is, massively popular to this day, a lot of people forget what actually happened within The Witcher 3. And if you get people to come back and you return, and also if you have a Switch 2 upgrade at the same time, you can introduce this game to a much bigger audience while also getting people, reinvested in this franchise. It's just something that sounds perfect. And we've actually seen other developers do this. The greatest example is Borderlands 2. 7 years after release, they introduced a new DLC. And of course, it did exactly what I would think that The Witcher 3 to Witcher 4 would be, which is it was a bridge DLC. The DLC called Commander Lilith and the Fight for Sanctuary, and as the title suggests, it meant to bridge the events that took place between Borderlands 2 and the upcoming Borderlands 3, and there was some other gameplay stuff, and they increased the level cap, and I'm sure if this is actually going to be happening for The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, there would probably be some other gameplay and some other improvements and stuff like that. Now, I think people need to understand one thing about this. This is not something that CD Projekt Red themselves are working on, and this goes to the same with Cyberpunk 2077, but we'll get to that in a second. They actually are using outside developers to work on content. And with Fool's Theory, this isn't just like some random Polish developer that has no experience with this franchise or the Red Engine or any of that. Fool's Theory is actually composed of various Witcher 3 veterans. This is an article coming from Game Radar, and they point out now we know who exactly is working at the studio. The CEO, Jacob Rakoz, and co-owner of Fool's Theory, worked at CD Projekt Red for 5 years between 2010 and 2015, helping ship both The Witcher 2 and The Witcher 3. And design director Carolina Kuzia Rokaz spent a similar amount of the time at the studio, also working on both games. So two of the most notable people working at the studio in charge were working on The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. And as for the rest of Fool's Theory, it's an expansive studio currently boasting nearly 60 devs. Past work includes support on some major games, including Baldur's Gate 3, Divinity Original Sin 2, Larian, Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, and Outriders. And according to a press release, Fool's Theory's Witcher 1 remake, which is the only thing that we know that they're actually working on, that has been confirmed, will be a modern reimagining of the original. CDPR will be providing full creative supervision of the game, which will use the toolset CDPR is creating for the new Witcher saga, which pretty much means it's probably going to be worked on with Unreal Engine. And this refers to the new trilogy set to start with The Witcher 4. Now, I do think we need to go back to these remarks here, and it's really notable the fact that The Witcher 1 remake isn't actually coming beforehand. I honestly thought that there was a chance of that, but this seems to indicate that this is probably going to be coming, it has to be like 5 or 6 years out, which, again, the question now is raised, what have they been working on, Fool's Theory, with CDPR for the last couple? And I think that gives even more indication that this is probably the truth. This is probably what's been happening, and that gets me really excited to see what they are planning for The Witcher 3 and how they're going to announce this. I genuinely don't think it's going to be announced anytime soon, but it could be maybe at Gamescom, but it definitely sounds like this is something that's probably going to come maybe late next year. That'd be my assumption, but it is worth mentioning again, CDPR, they have a history of this. They're doing this with Cyberpunk 2077. It's worth mentioning that Cyberpunk 2077 in the end of 2023 was getting its last big update. That was how they marketed and talked about, I think it was update 2.1. They added some new content. Yeah, CDPR clarified to IGN that update 2.1 is meant to be the last big update. And then I think there was a strategy shift within the company right around that time in which The Witcher 3 and Cyberpunk 2077 CDPR's execs must have said, let's keep updating these games with some regular content, some improvements, get people, still talking about these games while keeping the franchises fresh and alive to get people excited, obviously, for the future entries and future games of the franchise. Now, in 2024, we got this surprising patch 2.2, and this was developed in partnership with an outside developer, Virtuous. 2.2 called Express Yourself, with the idea that players can express themselves more in game. It was some customization, some smaller stuff, but it does appear that CDPR has been working again with Virtuous because it was just revealed, it started off as a rumor that Cyberpunk 2077 was getting more DLC coming this year. The leak, as spotted yet by another eagle-eyed user on the Cyberpunk game subreddit, a senior writer at Virtuous had very recently listed Cyberpunk 2077 DLC under their experience on their LinkedIn profile. And the leak specifically mentioned writing dialogue for multiple new side quests and working to create these quests for upcoming DLC releases. And these rumors were swirling online, many people asking CDPR, and just the other day they actually confirmed it, that CDPR is not done with Cyberpunk 2077. There's going to be another update, and they're actually going to be talking specific details about this later this month, I believe it was said. I think it's June 26th that they said that they're going to open up and reveal what they've been cooking up. And yeah, the update will be known as 2.3, which probably indicates that it's going to be another free content update. Now, with The Witcher 3, again, that remains to be seen. CDPR is not talking about it, and if it's something that's still a ways out, I'm sure we're probably not going to be getting an official confirmation for quite some time. But it makes perfect sense. You see Virtuous, you see what they've been doing with Cyberpunk 2077, and now recent leak, which was confirmed, they're making new content, and it seems like Fool's Theory, they have an unannounced project that they've been working with CD Projekt Red on. It makes perfect sense. They're going to keep that game going. They're going to have a new bridge DLC, get us excited probably for what they're aiming for with The Witcher 4, or at least introduce some of the storylines, some of the themes that they're going to be exploring. And obviously, none of this is confirmed right now. It just makes a lot of sense. Bring in external development studios to keep these established games running and alive with some new fresh content, while the main studios concentrate on the future, the big new games to come. Dormancy is one thing that has hurt so many franchises over the years. And that's why you do see a pivot often to live services and stuff like that to keep these franchises fresh in mind. But if this is in fact happening with CDPR, this new strategy, a different one, I like it, and I really kind of want to see this from other development studios. But anyway, what do you make of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt potentially getting a story DLC expansion, and which way or what do you expect out of that? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.